Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Joining me on the podcast today is Ericka Saurit. She is the founder of Saurit Creative, which is a boutique brand marketing agency. This is really going to be such a fun discussion. We're going to talk about story. We're going to talk about leaning into that story and inviting people in. She has such an honest and curious approach. I love that. And I really think you're going to learn a lot, not only about your brand and marketing, but really about being able to invite people in to share the story and to feel a part of it and to use words and emotions to do that. So enjoy the podcast. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hi, Ericka. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michele. I'm super excited to be here.
Me as well. We had a little bit of a conversation prior to coming on camera, and we both are like looking to serve and to support the industry very much in the same way, very parallel, if you will, right? Finance and marketing.
And you have a background in tech too.
Right? I do. Yeah. 10 years in tech, and then started a tech company in the fall. So lots of tech going on over here for sure.
It's kind of an essential skill right now. You know, it really, I mean, even just the basics, it's important. We were just talking about, how people's attitudes about, meetings virtually have changed and their habits, but now just getting people on Zoom is great, and everyone feels really comfortable. So it's great.
It is. Tech has changed. It's interesting. I found a notebook where how many years ago? 24 years ago, I guess, almost 25 years ago, I was going through the process of determining if I was going to stay in tech or if I was going to come home and raise my family. And I found my journal at the beginning of this week where I was journaling, like, if I step out, I know I can't I can't go step out for 10 years and step back where I was. I'm going to have to step in.
Not in tech, even.
Not in tech. I'm going to have to step in a different place. And so I'm reading my entry to myself where I was processing that if I'm taking that step out, I don't get to go right back. Like it's an out for a while. Not that I couldn't come back in tech, which I've proven that I have and that I can.
And many women do, which
way.
is awesome.
That's right, but not in the same way, because it's continuing to move and evolve.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about interiors, I think, though, is even though it improves or evolves or changes, you can step back in.
Yes.
But the tech part has become so huge. I know. I'll just put it out there. Like we are having trouble in some of the companies that I've been working with and supporting at hiring employees over 45 who don't know how to do Word or Excel, like basic computer skills. Google folders, like the whole idea of transitioning, the whole system of it is overwhelming. And they either don't have a natural aptitude because it wasn't what they had growing up, but they don't all have a desire to figure it out. Like they just don't want to. And it makes me think
learning curve.
It's a big learning curve. But it makes me think of when I was a little girl and we got one of the first VCRs that came out. And then I can remember my parents getting to the point where they're like, oh, these electronics, we don't know how they fit together. And we kind of giggled at that. Well, now our kids are giggling at us.
Right.
What do you mean you don't know how to do that on your phone? What do you mean you don't? Right. So it's all shifting. But it is such a big part of our business, whether it's finances, digital marketing, client engagement, process management, whatever it is. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are, because I know that all of that plays a part for you as well.
Yeah, I have an interesting path. But it all, I mean, of course, now it all makes sense to me. I went to art school just out of high school, for college, knowing that I wanted to, thinking that I wanted to be a professional studio artist. I studied sculpture, and what I was doing in art school was really environmental sculpture. Really, I was thinking, I don't know if I look back on it, how how successful the pieces were. But what I was thinking about was like, how did these experiences with these kind of larger sculptures make people feel? And how did the environment I was creating, how was it shaping like how they walk through the gallery, or how was it walking, like how was it, affecting the movement of their body, which is kind of a fundamentally interior design focused point of view. And I took some interior design courses at the very end, like when you have leftover electives, at the end of my very last year of art school. But the university where I went, the interior design school it was not in the art school. So it was in the School of Human Environmental Science, which is the perfect place for it in some ways. But at the time I didn't see, I wasn't getting to what I really wanted to get out of it, which was, kind of the softer side, the decor side. I really wanted to kind of understand more about that. And so then I graduated with a fine art degree, and I moved to New Orleans, and I was going to live, the life of a studio artist, which I realized really, really soon after moving there, that was not going to be possible. So I got a job working, kind of almost full time in a landscape architecture firm. And that changed my life because I was exposed to the business of design, how designers think. I saw that it was at both ways very creative and very analytic. And it was a small firm. It was run by a husband and wife, and then they had a team of designers, and they had kind of a landscape kind of built-in team with it. And I just thought, like, designers and artists come from the same place. And I had never had this realization before. So they really encouraged me, if I wanted to, explore design, to go back to school. And so I did. I went back to graduate school for interior architecture, back to North Carolina. And I ended up being able to integrate my fine art background with interior design and the idea of, what might happen in space, in a gallery space, in a virtual environment. And I wrote this was at the turn of the century, the very first digital thesis for the University of North Carolina at the time. Now everybody's is digital, of course, but I did a whole virtual museum experience and did all of my research based on that, and then spent some time in Finland trying to understand, light. So my thesis project was the Museum of Virtual Light. So at the time I was learning, how to model space and how to understand, how to, research and communicate what it took to talk about this thing in a world where people were really fighting technology around the year 2000. They were really like, we had Y2K. This was going to end. Remember how it was going to end?
Oh, no. I remember.
It was
funny. I was writing up just a short blurb about my life for a couple of different groups that have asked for it. And I was writing it this morning. And I wrote in there about Y2K, when the tech world was supposed to end. And my husband had actually lost his job at the end of 99. You know how they were all going through and laying everybody off? They had put a hold on all hiring. So he could not get a job because nobody would hire, because they thought it was all going to crash, as it rolled over. And the first thing they did in January was they
hire everybody back.
Frenzy, and everybody got hired back. Yeah. But that Christmas was probably one of the most difficult Christmases for us, because we were worried that the tech, everything
was going to change.
Everything was going to change.
Every system was going to go down.
Everything it was bad. Our stocks, everything just plummeted over the tech. It was terrible. And now we look back and look where tech is compared to that. And we were worried back then.
We were worried back then. And isn't it funny how, 2010, we saw kind of a repeater of this. And now in 2020, it's like this 10-year cycle for tech is, be warned. You can't predict what will happen in 2030, but let's be prepared for
Fingers
whatever it is.
crossed, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I think, even just hearing that first part of your story, Ericka, is when you mentioned about, I can't say, because I don't have that fine arts background, but I can't say that I ever thought about, and it makes perfect sense, but the studying of how your body moves when you see art and those kinds of things. But I know what happens to me when I love going to like the High Museum of Art here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's a
I know
good one.
how I feel. Yeah. I know how I feel when I go in, and I know what it does to me. We have the Monet exhibit that has come through here, and we have a couple of others that are like that. And I love Impressionist art. Like, it's just, it, for whatever reason, I'm a high school and college in the 80s. It speaks to me. It was what I guess my art teacher loved, and she kept putting it in front of us. But having gone through the Van Gogh experience, and I feel deeply
Immersive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so it is there. That's why they're called immersive experiences. And they have you in those, and I feel my body leaning in and pulling back. But the thought to me when you said that was, in some of these courses, it really is art and design and business and sociology and anthropology and psychology. It's like all the ologies, right
All of
there
it.
together. Because art really, whether it's written word, expressed word, visual, it is it's an expression of a deep thought, a deep want, a deep need, something. It's meant to evoke, right? So just I mean, like, even the words that you use to describe it have painted a picture in my mind.
Well, okay. It doesn't stop there because after I graduated, so I taught a little bit in graduate school, and I taught visual communication, right? Teaching students how to draw and how to, communicate their ideas to the professors or to the panel, to the jury, when you sit in front of a design jury, and eventually kind of leading to presenting to clients or employers. And then I taught kind of while I was working after I graduated for several years in two different universities, kind of the same principles. How do you, either leverage drawing, and we kind of started to move away from that as as digital technology became more important. How do you, create renderings? How do you create, renderings we were doing with markers, which are still kind of some of my favorite, like hand-drawn sketches with markers and watercolor. Love that. But I was also teaching Illustrator and Photoshop, and how to really, use 3D Studio and all the different computer programs at the time to tell stories about space, and then presenting it. And so what I was teaching was really, it doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, of course, but even the best ideas, even the very best interior design will not matter if you can't present it, if you can't sell it to your client, if you can't sell the right story, if you can't sell the right benefits of the design itself, if you don't have that language and that communication. However it's done visually with words, oftentimes you're speaking. If you aren't able to present that and really catch people and get that story straight in the first few minutes, you lose them, and it's really hard to get them back. So I was teaching that at the time. I was I started working for an exhibition design firm called Ralph Applebaum Associates. And what they're famous for, what Ralph Applebaum was really famous for, was the Holocaust Museum, and in changing the way people experienced information about history. And I don't know if you've been there, if you're familiar with it.
I have been there. It's heavy.
And
it is very.
It's heavy, but that's kind of the point. It was like,
but it was a heavy time and a heavy experience, right?
And
so to walk out of it and not feel heavy would actually have not done it justice.
Exactly.
And I know we took our youngest son. It was too much for him to hold.
Yeah.
And he had to take a step out at the time, just with his age and his ability to handle.
But not for children.
That's right.
It's a heavy.
I mean, he was middle school, so he wasn't like little, but he's a feeler. He's a deep feeler, and it was a lot. But it is still, it's interesting that you say that, is that, and the 9/11 have been extremely impactful,
Powerful.
powerful. Even the Pompeii exhibit, like I go to a lot of those exhibits because I'm like,
Yeah,
I want to understand, I want to see, I want to feel, I want to experience a little bit just for that understanding. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that working. So I had been doing other projects while I was teaching and also kind of on my own. And again, following up sort of on my thesis work, I was really curious. It was sort of my dream job. I actually went to the office and sort of presented the work that I had been doing, and I had a 2.5 hour interview that turned into a job offer. And it was kind of like, how this is amazing. This is my dream come true. And I ended up working with, kind of sort of a multi kind of disciplinary team of content producers, people who are, historians, people who are writing for the exhibits that we were doing, obviously other interior designers, product kind of industrial designers to design, the components, graphic designers, obviously, architects to help us with, some of the bigger kind of spatial things that, actually the museums themselves. And what I really took from that experience was, those, of course, they need to be immersive. We're sort of shifting the way we understand either history or science or even culture, right? We want to give people such an impactful moment that they don't forget it. So it comes off the wall. It doesn't, no longer it's a timeline or something kind of like, this happened first and then this happened and then this happened.
Yes.
Because that's not really the way everyone's going to get it, right? But
The
if you
way
make
that
it
I think about
personal,
it is, the way I think about it is that you're inviting us to join the story, not
that's
to
right.
read the story. And some of it feels very much like I've been to all the museums in DC and they're nice, but I would consider them almost static. Like, here's a picture of a dinosaur. Here's where we found it. Here's some bones, like moving on, right?
Right.
You can read it and just move. In these immersive experiences, you feel like you're walking within the story. And I'll tell you the thing that my husband even said, because my children, we took them to so many museums growing up that they got museum fatigue. And they were like, don't take us to
Not again.
The only ones that they really, really liked after that was when we took them to Williamsburg, Virginia, because they got to walk through. It's immersive, right? But when we did the Van Gogh and some of the others, my husband was like, we went through that so slowly, where normally we're like, boom, looking, to the left, to the right, reading a little bit. Oh, did you read that? No, got this. I got this, like, fact. Go look over there. And then you're moving, right? We've been to the Country Music Hall of Fame. We've done all the things, but these make you linger.
Yep,
They
make you
make
lean
you
in.
feel like lean in, like you're part of the story. And I think that's what is so interesting about that particular work and the work that you do and help others. We want our clients ultimately to lean into us. We want them to see the story of their home or of their experience, right? We want them to have that.
Asking questions, right?
Yeah,
asking
but we
questions
have to start
like,
it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I did that work for a while, and it was amazing for about 10 years, all over the world, like China. I was based in Beijing and Shanghai, and then I had the opportunity to come back to the U.S. Prior to that, I had been sort of pulled. I kind of tell the story just as a joke. I sort of got pulled into the dark side of marketing, but what really happened was I think teams really realized that I was good at telling stories. I was good at drawing. I was good at writing. I was good at presenting. And I was good at taking big amounts of information and distilling them down really quickly, either into like literally into a tagline that everybody on the team could get like in their head. And so everybody was kind of saying the same thing about the project. And I think what happened was that the marketing team was like, come with us. Like, come. We need you to help us. And the more work I did, of course, the more, ways I learned just what was emerging at the time. Obviously, email's been around for a long time, and it's one of my favorite ways, sort of timeless way to capture and tell stories about whatever it is you're doing, services or products or museums or whatever. But I also was learning social media, and I was, so I was getting kind of all these sort of channels, so this education about technology, about how to use it, but then taking some of the background I had in interior design and art and kind of making and creating and applying that into kind of like digital space. So this is where it all started to come together. And what I realized was I really like this and I do not want to do any more, wall sections and CAD drawings. And I would much prefer to, understand and learn about this world and apply all of the, design knowledge that I have, interior design knowledge and product knowledge, and see what I can, how I can help designers. Because what I saw, like I said, going back to when I was teaching, was that I saw so many great ideas falling off the cliff, like getting ignored or being left, off the table simply because the designer wasn't able to articulate or communicate what the story was or what the concept or the principle or sort of that like one benefit was. And I thought that's maybe this is my purpose. This is what I'm meant to do, is I'm meant to help other people communicate their design ideas better so that those beautiful ideas don't die. They don't go away. They don't die on the table, and they get to have a life. And that's what I've been doing since over 10 years. And I love it. And the more I learn, the more, I'm able to bring to my clients. And it's my purpose in life. It's my mission. I'm really excited to have found my way here, even though it was not a non-traditional path, but many people have this, and I'm excited to be delivering the work that I can.
It's interesting. We talk about often how there are so many different avenues within any industry, and we're talking about the interior design industry right now. And I didn't come at it from a very traditional path either. I would almost submit that most today are not coming at it from a very traditional path. I do too. I really do. I mean, I don't have any, I'm happy for the traditional path, but I'm happy that we can make use of our varied experiences to live out what's in our heart and the joy that it brings us in doing what we do. I even look back, I'm a firm believer that God doesn't waste anything in our life if we allow it to be pulled together. So I look at the fact that I wanted to be a teacher, and I now teach financials, but I wouldn't teach in a school system. I wanted to do math and science. And so I went a tech route, did tech for 10 years, started a tech company. I wanted to be creative. And so I made window treatments and did light design, and I published a magazine, and I was a spelling bee champ. And so all those things show up for me. Like I look at something and just see it. It just like shouts at me. And I know that for some that could be very much an irritant, but it is something that has been able to carry forward. Like pulling all of the things together, the love of numbers, the way you tell stories with words, I can tell stories with numbers. I can look at them. I can see what they're showing you. Like I can tell you where it's going to go. I can tell you how it's going to play out. I can tell you the changes we need to make to change the story, right? It doesn't have to stay that static story. I can tell you how to immerse yourself into the financials, like all the things that I can do. But it is from a 30 plus year history of almost looking at it from so many different angles and being to assimilate all of that together. But that's the beauty of growing as a human, of growing in our knowledge base. You said something too, Ericka. You said it multiple times. I don't know if you recognized it, but
hope it was a good thing.
It's a good thing, but it's one of my words for the year. And that's why, of course, it's like hitting me. So I have 3 words that I'm focusing on for the year 2023: kind, soft, and curious.
Oh.
And you kept saying, I'm curious about this. And then I was curious about this. And so I'm seeing this. If I were to just look into the way that you've described things, I see you very much as an active learner. I see you as being extremely curious about your surroundings and about what informs your opinions in those surroundings. But I see you as an action taker, just from the description of what you've given already, because you're not just curious for curiosity's sake. You're curious, and then you take some action based on the information that you've gathered. But then I also see you as a sharer. because what you just described to me is, and so then I taught a class, and then I went here, and then I said, let me inform you. And then I get pulled into this, right? That's very much the way I am. I'm like, if I've got the knowledge, if I've got the goods, I want to give it to you. I don't want to just hold it back. Yeah. Where do you think that, did I nail it? Did I get it right?
Thank you for that. I don't know that anyone's ever told me those things. And what a really beautiful analysis. Thank you.
I affirm
I'm going
you
to take that.
Yes,
take
you
that
should.
to heart. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You should. I really want to affirm you in that.
Thank you.
You invited me into that part of your story just by sharing your story. Like that, as they say, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and that's what it felt like you were putting down. Which is interesting because like I have like words that I want to continue to build into my story. So I told you, kind, soft, and curious. I have them on a sticky note over here so that I can remember. But I want to be a kind leader, a gracious manager, an active listener, a decisive action taker, and a supportive guide. And so I work
it's
day
February.
to day.
You've already done all those.
I've done it. Check.
What are you going to do for the rest of the year?
But I say that because it's about building, for me, it's about building these things intentionally into my story. Right. And so it was sweet to hear you share your story and to hear that. But I'm curious, where do you think that that curiosity comes from for you? Have you always had that as a child? Like, what is it that has, because that's what's probably also making you hugely successful with your clients, is you're curious about their story. You're curious about their path. You're curious about what makes them tick. Have you always been that way?
I think so. And I think most people who are creative, and creative doesn't have to manifest itself as like an artist or a musician or a writer. Like I think you know this, like some of the most brilliant minds in finance and in math and in physics and in any kind of like any industry, creativity is essential to innovation, right? It's about asking questions. It's about putting kind of maybe disparate things together in a way that nobody else has really thought about. And creativity is what makes, all of us kind of continue. Well, maybe I'm just speaking from my own perspective, but curiosity is what has, really driven me forward. And I don't know, somehow curiosity combined with, I'm quite shy. I'm very much an introvert, although I've had to become an extrovert over the last few years. But creativity and curiosity has kind of made me very bold, which is great. It's that counter to being such an introvert and being shy, that I've just, I've been compelled to find answers or to find out what I needed to know. And maybe I think a lot of creative people would agree, like they have the same drive.
I totally agree with that. I always laugh because I have always been creative. And I think I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. When people ask me, oh, you started your first company in 2000. I'm like, well, technically as an LLC with the government, I did. But if you go all the way back, like I'm selling Girl Scout cookies over here. I've got a side gig as a babysitter. I was braiding the girls' hair in high school. I was in middle school and they would come over because I could French braid, and I would French braid their hair before they went out on their dates or whatever they were doing. And then I can remember in college making wreaths for people. Remember when the like twig wreaths were a thing, all that. I'm making those in my college dorm room to take home to make side money. I'm selling my color-coded notes on my IBM Selectra. So like I'm constantly doing something and then selling it to somebody. So it makes me laugh when I think about that. But when I look at the story that you've just told, all right, so you started, I would say one of your big first moments was looking at the physical world of art and sculpture and how it makes people feel. Now you've moved into more of using words to tell a story, evoke a feeling, create a brand, create emotion, and draw people in. Why do you think words matter so much, especially in a visual industry, right?
This is a topic that so many people feel like it's very polarizing. In fact, I've
really?
seen, Yeah. Well, I've seen a lot of designers say, no, 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 no. I've just got so many great, I've got all my images or professional images, or I've been, I have them all on my website, or I have them all on Instagram, and the captions don't matter. What I say, it doesn't matter. And I say, oh, not true. Not true for two reasons. And sometimes if they don't hear one, they'll hear the other. The first reason is not everybody is visually able, like not everybody accepts information visually. They can see something, and we're trained to look at images and see certain things, and see, we read images in a very different way than someone who doesn't have a design or an art or creative background. So I'll just say that first. And what you show in your image is a very sort of, again, curated moment in time, that your words can help accompany and tell what did you do for this client? Like, what exactly did you do? Someone may look at it and say, oh, they just painted the space, which could be right or could be totally wrong, right? You don't want people making assumptions about what was done. So the words can help you bring people into the story even further, and help you explain your capabilities, what kind of work you really want to do. If you are doing full renovations and someone sees an image and thinks that perhaps you're just doing part of the space, you use words to tell a better story, tell a bigger story, tell exactly what you did. And then my approach for that is always to tell that story in a way that's going to emotionally resonate, going back to, again, creating emotional experiences, emotionally resonate with your client or your ideal client. So you want to be saying, if you want to work with more families, if you're showing, family rooms and you're showing spaces, you want to talk about togetherness. You want to talk about belonging. You want to talk about the things that someone who is looking for an interior designer who focuses on building homes for families is really going to resonate with. And that language is really, really important. So you have that opportunity. I think of it as an opportunity to add words and to, double tell your story. But the technical side of that is, and you probably know that, words help with SEO. Words are going to do a lot of organic marketing for you that you don't need to pay for. They're going to help with Google indexing your website. They're going to help with providing keywords if you're clever about how you write it for your area or for, the types of work that you want to do. So words are really valuable in many ways, multiple ways.
It's interesting. Years ago, we've seen the pendulum swing. Years ago, websites were words, 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 and a couple of pictures, because we didn't have, I'm going to say, the power to load so many pictures, or it slowed everything down. So everything was like you're waiting on the spinning just to get to the next page. And so we were encouraged back in the day to load it up with words and sprinkle in pictures. Well, then the pendulum almost went the other way, where the websites were like, don't say a word. Your pictures will speak for themselves. They'll buy
Flash.
Yes, yes.
Flash player.
And so that's what we had over there. The truth is probably, like anything, somewhere in the middle. I've been on the jury for multiple projects where you were like, WCAA and IWCE and all these different IDS, where we were looking at pictures of interiors or of window treatments or of something, and we were trying to make a decision. And I always tell people when they ask me, Michele, you've been a juror on those, what's the winning secret? I said, the winning secret is to describe what you did and the pain. Describe the pain and describe how you solved it. Because if not, there are some of the pictures, even just last year, I remember a picture coming up at one of the awards banquets. And when we looked at it, we were like, why did that win? It is so simplistic. I don't get it. Like, it looked like something that anybody could have done. And then
next part.
They started describing the problem. They started showing the before pictures. They started showing where moldings came in and where they were stopped here and stopped there. They started showing where they had to be creative and where the engineering came in to make it look so simple. And by the end, we were all like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But if they had not taken us into the story and down the path, we would have looked at something and we would have drawn a completely different conclusion than we drew by the end. I've also looked at pictures, and remember how I said a minute ago, going into some of these museums, you feel like you're walking up and I'm here and the picture's there and I'm looking at it and I'm walking further. That's what happens without words. We just take it as the whole, right? We don't either narrow down. We don't look at a bit or a piece of it. We don't even know the story. We're writing our own story. And that's what I tell people. In the absence of your story, everybody will write their own. The challenge is you
That's
don't
beautifully
know
said. Yeah.
Right? You don't know if the story they're writing aligns with the one you're telling. Just like when you send somebody an email and they don't respond, what story do we start telling ourselves? They're angry, they're mad, they're going to cancel, some blah, blah, blah. We go into all the negative storytelling when they just were away for the afternoon. Yeah. They're just like, I'm going to get to it later. Sorry, got overwhelmed, or my kid was throwing up and I couldn't get to my email. I mean, it's rarely the story we tell. And so that's the beauty of using the words to tell the story. Now, I will say there are times when the captions are 4 pages that you're like, have a little brief. But it doesn't mean we go right from one to the other, too wordy or no words. Go somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I completely agree. Yep.
So how do you get your story straight? How did they start determining what story they even want to tell in those pictures? Because again, they could take that story in a lot of different pathways, right?
Yep. So one of the things, before we start with that, I always start with, okay, before you can start to message your brand, and that messaging has obviously a series of pillars or tiers. By the time you get down to writing captions or writing the about copy on your website, or writing kind of more detailed description, you have to sort of get to the top of the pyramid. And the top of the pyramid is like the strategy of who you are as a business. Many people have a different approach. It starts with values. I will certainly agree that you really have to understand the why of what you're doing, in order to really to be able to do most anything in your business properly with a system.
100%.
You say with integrity, and I will completely agree with you. You have to have that kind of guiding light, that benchmark for what really matters to you most.
Mm-hmm.
Those values will help you, make decisions about your business. But I also start to say, okay, there's a difference in thinking about your business. It's a business mindset versus a brand mindset.
Okay.
Because a brand is going to, or having a brand mindset is going to allow you to create a series of emotions and feelings, and associations about your business in the hearts and minds of your clients. So brands are doing this whether we like it or know it or not. Like if you look around the room, anything that you've purchased, made a decision to bring into your life, clothing, your toothpaste, your car, your desk. I know designers are crazy about like pens and, there's a brand affinity for those, your running shoes. All of these are brand decisions that have been made because a brand has created a narrative that helps us understand an affiliation for that thing. And you can do that with your interior design, service brand also, as well as your product brand. And that's really what you want, because when people are making a decision, and there's always a decision between, sort of person A, person B, person C, you don't want them to be, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, but you don't want them comparing you on price. And if they're also comparing you on style, when that pendulum of style swings, you go out of style and then you're left with what? So you really want to be thinking about your business as a brand so that it can help you strategically make decisions that over time will resonate with the right people. And I have a three-part system for getting to figure out that strategy, because the strategy is what keys directly into the storytelling, whether it's a tagline or it's captions for your, social media, or captions for your photo and your portfolio, or, any other kind of narratives, what you say at a party, what your employees say when they're like, if they're on an airplane and someone asks them, what do you do? Like, oh, I work in an interior design firm. Okay, that's great. There's no more questions asked about that. But if you say, if your employees are repeating this sort of value that your business is based around, that's providing a benefit, it's going to start a conversation. And that going back to that kind of leaning into a story, that's really what you want people to be doing, because that's also what makes you unforgettable. That's what makes you different and unique and all of the things that you want, right? But that kind of mindset of shifting from just business thinking to thinking of yourself as a brand will, be the beginning of the work that we do.
I think some of it, and that was very beautifully said, I think some of it too comes down to us being willing to invite in the curiosity, not being afraid of what they might say and ask us, because we are so secure in that. Every single person that I coach, we start at their why. And I know that there are some that have got their feathers a little ruffled when they come in, and I've been working for 25 years, and why are we going back to that? And I'm like, because that is the fount that it flows from. Like, that is it, right? Whether we're making a marketing decision, a hiring decision, a process decision, or a financial decision, it must be in alignment with why you're here and what you're trying to do. Because anytime we start, you talked earlier about disparate kind of things. The minute we start making disparate decisions, it's not going to pull together. You've lost it. It is not going to gel. You're going, if you feel like an octopus now and you're all reachy, it's going to get nothing but worse. And so when we can go back, even just to review it, it doesn't mean we're going to change it. I review mine at least every 6 months. I go back and reread it. And if somebody comes to me with like a collaboration or some big deal, I pull mine out and read it before I even dig in, because I want to make certain that I want to be known for the way I want to be known. I want my billboard to be my billboard for the brand and what I'm trying to do. And, there are times if we're not careful, we don't know who we are, we can be so sucked into somebody else's story that we no longer have ours. And I work with designers all the time. Yep. That's exactly right. Who they have not been, you talked about a minute ago, that the more you learned and the more you knew and the more you kind of dug in, the more boldness that it gave you. And I tell designers, my goal is to give you like a steel rod in your backbone, because you so know who you are and as a company, what you're here to do and how you're going to serve. That pricing to me is tertiary. It is always at the bottom. Like, if I'm trying to make a price decision, then it's probably some commodity that's throwaway that I don't care, because I know I can replace it. That's how I make those pricing. I can replace that. Nah, that's a shirt for one season. I'll wear it. I don't care. I'm moving on. When I'm trying to make another decision, I'm looking at value, quality, lifetime value. That's more important to me. Then I look at price under the framework of quality and value, right? And if we don't know that, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you want to think about this in marketing terms, so if you are making, let's say you're considering the purchase of toothpaste. I mentioned this before. You're going to the grocery store or wherever, at the pharmacy, wherever you're getting your toothpaste, and you're seeing all the choices of toothpaste, right? You know that toothpaste is only going to last you whatever, a month or however long your tube of toothpaste lasts. So your purchase, like the decision to purchase that, is very short. The thought process you go through in your mind, probably not so emotional. Maybe it is, maybe not. But really, that purchase, kind of the emotions around and the motivation for that purchase, could be based on, things you've always used. It's easier. It could be based on price, right? But it's really short. You don't spend months and months and months in the aisle of the grocery store or wherever making a decision about toothpaste. However, you do make your clients are making a very important and big investment, not just in their, what it's going to cost, but in, the risk, right? They're going to have to potentially move out of their home. They're going to have to relocate their family. They're going to have to, and
they're going to have to live with these decisions for a very long time.
So that means where, Crest or Colgate, not to call these brands out for any other reason other than they're just top of mind, they are having, very fast messaging strategies that you can kind of very quickly remember when you're in the grocery store making that really fast purchase decision. That's great. However, as an interior designer, you have to think like that entire span, let's say it's a month, let's say it's several months, let's say it's, I mean, for some people it's years before they learn about you, they meet you at a party, they see you online, they follow you, they're kind of absorbing all of the things that you're sharing with them. They're going to your website, they're seeing like maybe they're looking at you on LinkedIn, or they're finding all these different ways to be exposed to your brand. And you want to make sure, very sure, that the message you're giving them every single time they encounter your brand over that course of time, no matter how long that is, that it's consistent, that it's unforgettable, that it's emotional, that it's beautiful, that it's talking and communicating all the things that you find important about your brand and necessary for them to make the decision to choose you over someone else. So that's why having a very clear strategy, having a very clear point of view, having a very strong and bold focus on making sure your message is clear is really important. And that's the work that we do, is kind of help figure that out, and why it's important.
I think part of the maturity of a business, Ericka, is understanding that one business can't serve all people. And I know, right? And I know that even as a business owner at the beginning, the goal here is, especially when you don't have a lot of clients, you're trying to serve as many people as you can.
Whoever walks in the door.
That's right. I used to always say, if they show up breath in a checkbook, like, come on, right? Then I realized that wasn't enough. Right. But we tend to have a wider gate, if you will, when we're first starting, because sometimes we don't know who we are. You mentioned knowing your point of view. Sometimes it's easy to start and not know your point of view. You're just starting. You're just trying to get it going. You're trying to craft your point of view and find your point of view. You haven't even had enough experiences to create it. And then you start going through that maturity process of business where you're like, okay, number one, I can't serve everybody. Number two, I don't want to serve everybody.
You work with a client that's kind of not your jam, and you're like,
that's right. And you're like,
figured it out.
I hope we never see each other again. Or you're going through the process where you think, and I used to tell this all the time, if it was a job you hated, do not put it on your website, because the thing that you hate doing, I swear to you, everybody's going to call you for that thing. Because whether it's a window treatment or whether it was a design, if you promote it and you put it out there, you were telling people, hey, here's the billboard of what I do. Call me if you want the same thing. So if you don't ever want to do it again, put it in a personal stack and move on. But we're having to learn that. Talk to me for a minute, talk to our listeners, because I really love the idea of having a business or a brand point of view, not just a message. We hear about having a message. We hear about, using our words like we all hear it, right? And I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying, but really having a point of view is different, because a point of view can be somewhat personal, and it means you've got to stake a claim, and it means you have to be bold, and it means you need to be confident. And that's a little different than I can have this nebulous brand message that never really is about Michele and Michelle's point of view. Right. I mean, it is. And I know if I see this and we're talking financials and we're talking full on business strategy, because we go through all these same things. We just don't focus in. Right. I will take them and say, I can help you do all of this. And here's what you need to do in your marketing. So go call Ericka, because she's going to take it. Like, I can diagnose that we have a disconnect, but that's not the place that I'm carrying them forward. Right. So talk to us about point of view, and in a life cycle of a business, some may come in with it, but many don't, especially those that are coming in with varied experiences. How do you see that being formed? When do you see that being formed in a business?
I think even if you're just getting started, I mean, obviously you're coming from somewhere. You weren't just born yesterday and, dropped into interior design. You have something.
Patch of interior design.
That's right. Like, visualize that. You have come from somewhere. You have some kind of valuable experience. That pivot that you may see as unrelated, or, maybe potentially even negative. In my process, I ask designers and brands that I work with to do several exercises. We do them together, but one of them is to do a list of positives and negatives. And this is really important when you think about, again, building a brand, because when you think about, like, let's say Disney or Apple, right? you probably have some positive and maybe some negative feelings or associations that are wrapped up in that brand. But let's say if you do a list of positive and negative and you're a brand new designer, maybe one of your negatives is people perceive me as really small, or people perceive me as inexperienced, or people perceive me as, not having enough whatever to get this job done. So I say, fine, like let's do a Martha Stewart where she went to jail and was able to flip that.
That's right. She totally flipped the script, didn't she?
Like,
she flipped the script.
She's working with Snoop Dogg. I mean, she really made herself relevant. She took something actually that could have really sunk her brand out of business. It could have really put her completely out of business, but she didn't let it. She took that as a message and she said, okay, I made a mistake. Fine. But I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to be relevant to a different audience, because I may have, some of my, my audience may not appreciate that I went to jail for what I went for, but she took that negative and she turned it into a positive. And I think that you can take almost any negative, right? A background in finance, someone may say, oh, but you're not creative. But you know what? Absolutely, I am creative. And I'm also going to be able to make sure this project comes in on budget. That's a positive that comes out of what could be perceived as a negative, right? So we do that exercise early and trying to figure out the messaging.
So important, Ericka. I want to just stop there for a minute and put like a verbal exclamation on that, because I'll have people come to me and say, almost apologetic, well, I was a nurse. And I'm like, awesome. That means you understand triage. That means that you can walk into a situation and you can take a quick assessment. Like, okay, you're not bleeding out, but you're a little bit angsty. And like, maybe this is like, you can do that. You understand how to calm somebody in a time when maybe their feelings are big. I want you to look at all the skill sets that you learned as a nurse or as a teacher. Like I see a lot of nursing and teaching and all of those professions. I'm like, oh my gosh, you care about people. You understand feelings and emotions, and you understand how to like cut through the mud, if you will. Look at how you can now bring that into what you're doing in the interior design or window covering space, into your creative business. And I'm with you. I think for me, we're all made in the image of God, and he was a creator. Therefore, we are creative, whether it's by word, by deed, by thought, it's all creation. And learning how to harness that and own that is really a beautiful thing.
And be proud of it, and know that. So this, going back to this process of thinking, like your question of like, how do you start to think like a brand? When I was saying that there's kind of a 3-step strategy, this is part of it. That first part is to say, and really be committed to understanding what it is that makes you extraordinary. That's the first part. Some people call that your differentiator.
I like the extraordinary better. Let's go with that.
Yes. Well, I made these start with an E, because I'm Ericka, and it gets easier for people to maybe remember these 3 E's. So the first one is extraordinary. Like what did you do, whether it's nursing or teaching or finance or whatever that background is that made you different? How do you come into this, right? And you really call it out, and we go through a whole process of really getting down to what can you bring from that forward, and what's going to be relevant. So the second step of this is what's going to be that, going back to that emotion, what is that emotional connection that you are going to be able to articulate about your work and the kind of work that you want to do, that's going to resonate with your, let's say, people say ideal client or target client, or the client that you really want to be working with, or right. So when I have been doing this, like I said, for many years, both as an interior designer and then in the marketing profession, where we look at specifically these core emotions or those motivations or the drivers behind what make us, and I will say the purchase decision. So we talked about, purchasing toothpaste versus purchasing a sweater, or purchasing, interior design services, the purchase decision of, what you understand about what someone's mindset is before they get to you. And, is there a match, first of all? But I've identified 5 that I work with my clients to really, get deeply into. when you purchase toothpaste, or when you do, and I'm not certainly not the overall author of this kind of work. It's psychology. It's consumer brands have really kind of narrowed down. They have like 16 or 17 core emotions for what drives people to make purchases, and they really understand that, and that's how they're able to create marketing messages that speak to you. But I took that research and I applied it to interior design services. And I thought, are there ones that keep recurring over and over again? What have I seen in my career? What have I seen in my practice? What have I seen with all the designers that I work with and the brands that I work with? And I narrowed it down to 5. So I think there's 5 sort of core emotions that your clients, one of them, sometimes 2, that they'll come to you about. And the third one is the idea of experience. How do you take all of this and apply it over? And we started to talk a little bit about the funnel of marketing, but how do you take all of this messaging and apply it to each step of your process of communicating your brand, marketing it, whether you're on your website or social media? How do you apply it to each of those places to make sure that if it's a multi-year kind of thought process for them before they call you and say, I'm ready, are you making sure that that message is consistent?
So, Ericka, all of that sounds so intriguing to me. When we hang up, I'll talk to you about mine. But I am curious if our listeners are out there today and they're thinking, this resonates with me. Like, that's the story I want to tell. I want to find out my point of view. I want to be able to not just market and not just create a brand, but I want to be able to have a strategy for this, right? And sometimes, let's be honest, marketing strategies sometimes are not quick. They are longer processes, just like financial strategies. I think sometimes we think of the marketing process as an in, out, and a fast, and not saying there aren't some of those things that they can be. Just like over here, I can have you cancel a subscription. We can get a fast financial win, but that doesn't mean that it's going to change the entire trajectory of your business. Right.
That's right. I think that's really well said. Thank you
with the
for
one thing. Yeah.
putting it in that that framework. It sounds great.
Well, and I think we have some fast wins, but we're looking at a longer game here as well, and in all areas. And we just need to acknowledge that. So if somebody's listening today and they, like me, are like, okay, this is exciting, this is interesting, and I like your vibe, I want to hang out with you, how can they find you? Where are you hanging out these days? In the digital world, of course, right?
In the digital world, yeah. I have a website, obviously. It's www.saurit, Saurit, creative, .com. And I have tons of, information. I love content. I've got a media page full of things like articles and previous workshops. People can kind of dig into that, or they can find me on Instagram at Saurit Creative, Saurit. And then I also do, I have a brand audit, which is like a template to help you see all on one page where how your brand message might need to be adjusted. If perhaps, you have never sat down, and really none of us have until you do this, sit down and put all this on one page. And it sort of prompts you to look across, all your social channels, your email signature, your business card, what you say at a party when you introduce yourself, what a client might say about you when they refer you to someone else, when you Google yourself, what comes up, so that you make sure that that message that you're putting out about what you do and why it's valuable. Again, you're not just describing, I do interior design services. Okay, so what? Like, why should I care? So you see all of this on one page, and then you get a really good, a really clear kind of overview of where you need to focus the message and get your story straight.
Amazing. And they can have access to that.
It's free. Yep.
On your
just
website,
download
right?
it. Yep.
Okay.
It's Saurit. Oh, it's sauritcreative.com/brand audit, AUDIT, all one word. Yeah. And it's easy to do. Probably do it in like less than half an hour. And
okay.
yeah,
Perfect.
very
I'll put
informative.
all that in the show notes for them
Cool.
too, so that they'll have access to all of that. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I feel like I could sit here for hours and continue talking to you. But,
likewise.
Thank you for sharing
You're welcome,
your story.
Michele. Thank you for having me.
Story for us. You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
It was great. I enjoyed it a lot.
Me too. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Ericka, thank you so much for such a fun conversation. I had to stop and check the time, or we could have kept going. It was really great to be invited into your story, to see how curiosity has led you down the path that you've taken, and also how you've been able to use the different aspects of your past as well as your training, and to tie it into something that is serving the interior design industry in such a huge way. For those of you that are listening, if you're looking for a strategy around your full business and financials and that kind of thing, I would love for you to also check us out over at Scarlet Thread Consulting. Go out there and do a financial health survey. Check out our cash flow position document. Learn to understand the financials in your business. Learn to understand the story of your numbers. And if you want to understand the story of marketing, check out what Ericka has, because both of us in our own way would love to be able to support you and your business. And here's what I'll always tell you: profit doesn't happen by accident. Profit is a Choice is proud to be part of the designnetwork.org, where you can discover more design media reaching creative listeners. Thanks for listening, and stay creative and business minded.